Welcome back to The Walk, presented by the Ethics Guild podcast. Today we have an amazing chapter to talk about. Chapter 2 talks about Job, and Job probably leaves us into many parallels and many questions. We're going to try to answer some of those questions with our criteria, with our opinions, and also what we understand. We hope that this reach out to you and that you're able to also have a lot of questions for yourself and that God is able to answer those questions that you have. So stay tuned and welcome to the walk.
Let's jump
All
in.
right,
guys.
so let's start this party, guys.
All right.
So, Job, I'm gonna pass it to the left, to Autumn, because in our last chapter, we were talking about it. We were getting into Job, and we wanted to already start the episode. It's crazy. Like we were going in there. So, what are your thoughts about how the devil was trying to, I would say, test God through Job? Like, what was that event happening in the heavens? So, how do you perceive that?
Yeah. So there's a lot happening in Job's story. Um, and right, it begins with the devil going up to God and saying, God really loves Job and he's righteous. And then the devil comes in and he's like, well, he's only righteous because like you've never tested him, you've never given him any hardship, but I can like make that go away. So it basically wrestles with Job's suffering. And what sticks out to me is this time around, because I've read Job many times, and I used to always, like, whenever I was going through suffering, I would try to analyze, is this coming from God? Is this coming from the devil? And this time around, as I'm reading, I'm kind of more struck by, like, it doesn't matter where it's come from, but it's kind of like to analyze the posture of your heart while suffering. Because I know it's easy to talk about our crosses, but then it's different when we have to carry our cross. And so for me, like as I was reading it this time, there was like the devil kind of wanted to show that he could break somebody down to get like a soul to curse God, right? But Job didn't do that throughout the Bible, throughout his story. And for me, what comes up as well is the difference between complaining and lamenting. And I think when you lament, it's kind of like you're bearing your cross to God through prayer, and it's almost like a song of a cry to Him. Like this is hard and like this is painful, but like I'm praising you throughout it. Yeah, so that's what was striking me so far. How about you guys?
What about you, Kevin? What are your thoughts?
With Job, I like how I love his whole story, right? Where his faith was all good in God and God knew that. And the devil was testing God and testing God through Job. And Job was that person who like when catastrophe came, he still gave his blessings towards God. And it's not like he cursed God. Like even when everybody was telling him to curse God, and all the catastrophes that happened to him, it's like losing your kids, like having him lose all his wealth and all his stock and all that, like that. I think Job would have went on, but I think one of Job's like final like hurts was then losing his kids and then going into his health and his health dwindling. And with that, Job stuck to having faith in God and trusting his wisdom when literally everybody was telling him, don't like start cursing God. Even his wife was telling him start cursing God. And Job said, no, praise be to the Lord. And it's not like Job was going through sufferings, but he didn't curse God. And that shows like the love that also God has, right? Like it was hard for Job to go through those sufferings while also loving God in the fullness and not hating God for all those for all those things that happened to him. Like imagine you're going through so many hard times, like chaos happens and more chaos happens, and then chaos starts dwindling down, and it's not until he has that conversation with God about it, like he didn't question God on he did question God on like the why, but God answered with showing the complexities of the world, and answered with the question back into Job and telling him just trust. And after that conversation that Job had with God, like the chaos like ended. The devil's work on Job did not work, and God's work will always work over that one. So it's like when chaos happens, it has me reflecting like chaos is gonna happen, and chaos might even keep happening, but I still have to praise the Lord, and I can't curse God for the chaos. This might just be a trial, might be a test that could be going on, because Job was tested in that moment. He was tested during that whole span. So it has me thinking about chaos, and when it happens, not to it is to question like why it happens sometimes, right? But then to understand like I might not even know why in this instant. I might not even know why from where I am living now, like how is my chaos going to impact even like 2,000 years later, because Job's story is still impacting our lives now in that chaos. And I'm pretty sure Job in his human form didn't understand the complexity of his story that was going on to even be transferred down into a human universal story that we still reflect on till today. Like Job probably couldn't even fathom that, like in the year 2000, like they didn't even know that they were before Christ, and we're in the year 2000 after Christ. So like his story is a fundamental foundation, and it just kind of also shows God's work in the story too, that we're still like even reflecting on a story that was older than 2,000 years, older than our civilization right now.
My major takeaway at the beginning of the book of Job is the whole book of Job is a complexity, and it's hard to understand why did first God allowed for Job to be tested. That's one of the questions I had for myself, and it's like, why not? Because we always think about why, but we never ask ourselves why not. What's in the test? Life is a test. So what I see is like God tells us through Job is like life is a test, and you're always going to be tested with good and bad. But what is it that you do when when the radical things happen? Job is a story about radical things: super wealthy, healthy, family, happiness, and then catastrophe strikes to the worst, right? Not only on his family, on his wealth, but also on his own health and his credibility. And one of the things that amazes me about Job, in the book of Job, is when the devil comes to whisper the sin. So it seems like the devil knows all the sins, but doesn't know all the blessings. He seems to ignore the blessings, and he questions, right? And in his envy, he questions, like you said, he questions, hey, Job behaves like that because you keep blessing him. So as soon as he says that, God already knew that the devil was wrong, and also because he knew he was wrong, not only because he knew the outcome of Job already, but he knew that the devil is so limited in comparison to understanding the universe like God does, and how he understands his own creations better than anyone else. This is why I was telling you earlier. To me, one of the things that struck me was how in the book it shows how God is omnipresent, and the devil is limited to not being omnipresent. That, and also asks for permission. So that means like the devil can't touch you without God granting that permission. And to me, that's what really opened my eyes a little bit. I don't know if you guys want to kick in with that perspective.
Hmm. Something else that really struck me is the fact that nobody can take your faith away from you. So if you're locked in a room with nothing around you, you still have the ability to pray. Like, prayer can never be taken from you. Material possessions can. The only thing that can prevent you from praying is yourself. And I think with that in mind, I was thinking of like your posture of suffering. When you're suffering, you have the ability to still stay connected to God through prayer so that He can get you through. Um, and I think while you're suffering, I know a lot of people, myself included, it's easy to get frustrated, it's easy to get angry, to question. And just to jump ahead really quickly, I love when God responds to Job's questionings. He answers with himself. So God answers him with a bunch of questions that are beautiful to contemplate in and of itself. But through his reply, God is replying with himself. He is the answer. And so when I close my eyes and I'm thinking about the trials that I endure while I'm suffering, the only thing that gives me true comfort is Him, is God Himself. And when his friends come, the friends are interesting characters, by the way. They sit with him for some time, and they're sitting with him in silence. And I feel like that was where they were doing well. They just were, sharing the presence with him. Like, we're just going to sit here with you. But then as soon as they open their mouths, it just goes downhill from there. And they're like, this is your fault. This is why. But it made me contemplate, like, okay, when someone's suffering, we don't know why they're going through what they're going through. We never really know the cause of a particular suffering. As much as in our human capabilities, we're trying to figure out why we're going through this. How can this come to an end? And we start blaming. We pull out our finger and we do the blame game. And I think, like, his friends, they really poured the salt in the wound, because God Himself said Job is a righteous man. And yet his friends are saying, like, well, surely somewhere in your life you did wrong, and this is why this is happening. And, I feel like the way that they are viewing his suffering is also a cross to him, because he's got to hear their judgments. And it makes me reflect, when you're accompanying a friend in their time of trial, just be there for them. Like, just your presence is a solace to them. Because as soon as we try to take the form of a teacher and try to teach them about their suffering, it goes downhill. But if we sit there with them and we bring them to the Lord, that's like the biggest remedy that we could ever give for ourselves. Because why point the glory to ourselves when someone is going through something hard so that we can feel righteous just by saying the right things? But really, why not put their hand in God's hand so that God can shepherd them forward? It just had me thinking too, like, this whole idea of suffering. Like, do we suffer well, and then do we accompany others while they are suffering well? And for me, that answer is, always to find that answer in God. Yeah.
Interesting.
That's a hard one too, with the friends, in a sense. It's like, during the past stories in the Bible, God is just. And God, like with Miriam, when we were talking about Miriam with Moses, Miriam got leprosy because she talked against the leader, Moses, and God did not want anything to happen. So God made an example out of Miriam, right? And so we read those stories, we recognize them, and we see that, like, hey, God is just. And then we have this righteous and innocent man who has done nothing wrong, and to say, and if he has done sin, like Job said, he would say it, and it's on. God knows his heart more than anything else, like what he says to his friends. And if he has done sin, then but like Job didn't do any sin. He was an innocent man, a righteous man, and yet all those bad things were happening to him. Of course, on the outside, if God is just and you see what's going on to it, it's like, why is God causing this much suffering to this man? What has he done? rather than like what are the trials and tribulations he's going through. It's like, oh, Job must have done something wrong. He had his whole thing taken away, all his wealth, livestock, and family. And even to throw a cherry on top, he had the sores, the blisters, and all that went on. And with his friends, it's like his friends were being there with him. They didn't talk for 7 days. And sometimes that's all you need is the presence. When the things started coming through, it's not like they were trying to belittle Job. They're like, Job, you must have done something because God is treating you in this way. And Job knows that he hasn't done anything, but his friends are just trying to be his friends, like, hey, repent. We want to see you get better. But they don't know the complexities of God either. They don't know that Job wasn't doing anything. He is a righteous man, but they didn't know that the devil was putting him through the trials. And that's like a difference between what happened to Miriam versus Job. God gave Miriam the leprosy. God is letting Job go through the trials in this one. So that's the difference that we can see in that. And I think this is like the first. I think this was the first story where we see God's justice in a different light, rather than as a like it wasn't a punishment. Like what I was saying before, His justice goes on even till today, right? And that's something that they couldn't fathom probably 2,000 plus years ago. So it just shows the justice now.
Yeah, it's interesting because the way I see um, the friends is society and the limitations of society, not understanding that what is more important, to judge or to be there, to be present for someone. And in a lot of occasions, people would render an opinion instead of rendering a hand. And I believe that is part of what the story is trying to teach us. Like, if you, even if you're an intimate friend, you still don't know the complexity of the problem of someone because only God knows that truth. And in most occasions, when we see somebody not doing so well and suffering, we always tend to think to ourselves, what did they do? What did they do wrong? Where did they made a mistake? Do they deserve it? Even we become so judgmental to say, well, they did it to themselves. But what is more important? What is to become a good friend? How do you become a good ally? Because even God in this story is telling us those are not good friends. How can you be a good friend? Be like God. You know, be like God. And also the trial, it's life itself. So when God is explaining and giving the questions back to Job, it's like life is complex. It wasn't meant to be simple because I created it, and it's so complex that if I was to explain it to you, you wouldn't understand. That's why I am the Alpha and the Omega. This is why everything has a purpose. It's like if you did this, there's a butterfly effect for everything that goes on. Right? So to me, it's the symbolism of these friends is it's kind of like what we live into society. You say something, everyone is trying to crucify you for what you're saying, but they're not going in more in depth of what is the truth behind it. Job's friend did not know that God was putting Job to the test. I think it's very important to understand. If the friends knew that truth, what would have they thought of? They wouldn't even understand why did God put Job to the test if he was a righteous man. And I want to bring it to this question because it says in the Bible that as soon as one bad thing happened, then right not even a second later another messenger came. Can you imagine what it was to have like back to back to back to back bad news, and every single one was worse than the other? Like how would we handle that?
Speaking from experience, I've like in my journey of suffering and carrying the cross, for me, it was easy to get frustrated and upset. But then the more that I've grown in prayer, you know, when you have true devotion to God, true devotion means you love God. And in your heart, that is what comes out. You love him, love for him. And when you are carrying a cross, you are being purified, right? We don't know why particular people go through particular sufferings. Only God knows that. That brings me so much solace and consolation. Because I'm like, if Kevin's going through a cross, I won't understand why, you won't understand why, but God knows exactly why he's carrying that cross and how it's going to shape him and mold him. That brings me so much comfort, because I'm like, if no one understands me, only God understands. Like, in his infinite compassion and understanding, he sees me here, and he knows the reasons why I got here, and he knows the reasons where, like, he will take me. That is so comforting, because it can feel very isolating to carry a cross and to go through, you know, the walk to Calvary. But knowing that he knows what's going on, and he has his reasonings for it, brings me a lot of consolation. I also think of Saint Veronica when we're referencing friends, because Jesus, here you have Jesus carrying his cross down Calvary. His face is bloodied, his face is disfigured, his body's ripped to shreds. And she comes over and just wipes his face. No, there's no conversation. There's no like, oh, you're going through this because. She comes over to him and just wipes his face from his blood, and he's able to keep going. And they exchange a glance. For me, that strikes me so much, because when someone is going through suffering, that's all they need. They just need a companion to come and wipe their face for them, hug them. Maybe they just need to be hugged while they cry, or they just need you to bring them some groceries. And it's, how do we show up for others? You know, do we get uncomfortable to show up for them? Does it cost us too much to show up for others? And how do we accept, also at the same time, how do we accept people's love? Because I know for some, it's hard to accept true love and true accountability. It's hard. So maybe in pride, we can easily reject someone's companionship or someone's love. And it goes both ways, because Job could have easily have said, hey, don't sit with me. Like, don't look at me here. I'm like, my sores are bleeding. I smell. Like, don't sit here. But I think even in his humility, he allowed them to sit with him for those 7 days. And we can learn a lot from that simple gesture, too. Like, sometimes it's okay to let people in to these areas where they're not pretty, and we don't want to put them on display, but we need to be loved there.
Very true, very true. With Job and his chaos, that goes on, like it's bad things that happened over back to back to back. It's like as soon as the devil had the opportunity, it's like I'm gonna just tear him down. And Job at the end of hearing like you hear one thing go bad, it's like, okay, that's only one thing. I have this many other things. Then you hear that thing go bad, and it's like, okay, that's one thing. I have this many other things. And then you hear another thing go bad, and again, it's like, okay, that's one thing, and then I have as many other things. But then you hear like, oh, all your kids died, like, and he was fruitful with his kids. All your kids died in a building, and it's like, that's one thing, but I'm not gonna have those things. And that's when Job like tears down, shaves his head, rips his clothing, starts going into full chaos. But he still doesn't curse out God. He still doesn't say anything like, "Oh, I curse you, God. I curse you for this, curse you for that." He still goes through it, and he tells God, like, he says, "I can't accept God's all goodness. I also have to accept the bad." And it kind of reminds me, like, I'm going to throw in just a little bit of yin yang in there, because God is all good, right? But then there's a little bit of like the badness that comes in with it. And when all things bad are going through, there's still a little bit of that goodness you can hold on to. It's like we rebuke the bad, but we want all the good. And then when there is bad that you can't rebuke, some people get blindsided and all they see is the bad, but they're not trying to see that little sliver of good. And a little sliver of good is like that God's there, and it's like that bad isn't gonna go fully bad. And then with friendship and companionships within Job, it's his companions were there. They were sitting there with him. They were in, maybe it was a full contemplation altogether that they were in for those 7 days. And sometimes it's hard to see your friend go through. No, it's not sometimes it's hard. It is hard to see your friend go through suffering, and it's like, why would you ever want your friend to go through the suffering in it? And they were staying with him, but then maybe in their own frustrations, they took it out on Job and said, "You're going through your sufferings because of this," instead of being like, "Job, we're sorry that you're going through your sufferings. How can we be here for you?" Instead, they're trying to cast their own judgments onto Job rather than just being there with him as he went through the sufferings. It kind of reminds me of fighters too. It's like you have these fighters in the ring, and it's like you're going through the battle, you're going through the fight, and then when you reach your corner, you're like, people are going to be there to wipe off your face. They're going to, some people will give you the advice on what to do into it, but they're there to make sure you're ready for the fight. It's like Joe's friends were like getting him ready for the fight, but then they were like saying like, "Don't fight no more." Like they're like, "Don't fight, just stand down."
To me, what's interesting about what you guys are talking about is how can we become supportive in a time of need. And I even bring it a little bit further. Like, Job being the position he was famous, he was known. And perhaps also that's where the metaphor goes. When you're at your highest, how do people treat you? Perhaps they don't even judge you. But when you're lowest, even your best friends will place judgment on you. And like you're saying, instead of focusing on that, why not focus on what really is going to make a difference when your friends need you? But it also shows us the limitations we have as a human being, that even though we want to help and we do our best, we're limited because we don't have the wisdom and the knowledge that God has to kind of give meaning when you're going through a painful moment in life. And this is what God teaches us through Job. It's like sometimes you just don't even need to understand, because if you tried, what would that do for you? But if you hold on to faith in me, that is going to have more significance than trying to understand all the whys of the world. Because the true meaning of love is God. Now, if you hold to God, you're holding up to love. And like you were saying, through those dark moments, holding on to that little light that you see at the end of the tunnel is what really matters. But sometimes we succumb to that. We give in to the temptation. And what Job shows us too is that the devil is just to do that, to confuse you, to destroy you, to plague you, to give you those moments that everything, he makes everything look dark. But God is that little light up there saying, I'm still here in your darkest moment. It's up to you how you reach to that light. If you don't let everything that opaques you be more strong than the little light that I'm beaming for you. So that's my major takeaway with Job, is the understanding that you can go through a therapist. Therapist is also limited. So what you should always do is don't only trust men, all right, in their experience and their qualifications. They are also limited. What is unlimited is God's love and wisdom. So if you go and find that, you don't even need the wife. It won't satisfy you. And there's a lot of people that have a lot of emotional disorders, and they're trying to figure out so much of the why. And it's important that you know some of the root cause so you can be able to cope better with certain traumas and emotions. But at the end, what saves you is, what do you do for yourself to rebuild yourself with the tools that you have? And sometimes if you take those tools and you start leading it to a unlimited source of love, that's what's going to free you. That doesn't mean you're not going to suffer. Let's keep that separate. That doesn't mean you're not going to suffer. Suffering is part of life. Just like you have happy moments, Job shows us this. You can be good one day, another day you're not. And then it goes back to good. That's just life. And this is why God tries to say, if I explain to you all the secrets of the universe, all you need to know, it's complex. And also, he compares it to two animals, the hippopotamus and the crocodile. They're wild, but you can view it as bad, but they're beautiful. And that's what life is all about, unexpected events, wild, unexpected events, right? And you can choose how you want to see that. You can see it through like a cup, halfway full, halfway empty. That's a choice you make on what you see about life, which, brings me, and what's interesting to me, the book of Job doesn't talk about Job being an Israelite. It's like the first mention of somebody being a Gentile. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, actually, yeah, because they mentioned that too when Elihu comes in,
Yes.
and he is an Israelite. So God calls Job a righteous man before all of this happened. So part of me feels like he had wisdom. So he has a relationship with God. He is praying, and I almost feel like too that's why Job like permitted him to go through suffering. So he has like a memory of God in his mind, which this whole week personally, memory has been playing such a big part in my prayer, because our memory is a gift, and the primary function of our memory is to be able to remember the goodness of God. Which, how amazing is that, by the way? And I think it's also given to us so that when we encounter suffering, we have our memory to be like, okay, wait, no, I remember when God fulfilled his promise to me, and I remember when God was good to me here, so that we have those memories to get us through the trial of suffering. So I feel like Job literally was going through everything possible, but he has these memories of God in his private life before all the suffering, where he remembers God's goodness, and that to me is so beautiful, because I want to remember God's goodness in my times of trial. And Jesus, right? He talks to the Gentile woman who comes to ask him for a miracle for her daughter, and they have that banter back and forth where he's like, I don't give crumbs to I'm gonna butcher it, to the dogs, and then she's like, no, something about the scraps, and then the woman's like, well, even the dogs eat the scraps from the table. And he did that to her because he was testing her faith to see how much she wanted it. And I feel like Job has beautiful faith, even though he's not an Israelite. Whereas you have Elihu comes in, and he sounds like he's saying the right thing, but it's still not the right thing. And that's the thing. There's like a partial truth in what he's saying, but the whole thing is not the full truth. And God comes in, and he's like, this is the full truth. And it's a good examination of conscience that I think we should frequently make with ourselves. Like, where is my faith today? Do I believe that God is good? Do I believe that he's faithful? And it's like a constant check-in, because you have Job, like you just mentioned, he's not an Israelite, but he's faithful. He has strong faith. Even through everything that he went through, he still has faith. And then when he finally cries out to God, it's a lamentation. He's lamenting to God. And that's what prompts God to respond, And we have to ask ourselves, we wake up every day, but we have to choose God, because we can go through our day as a pagan, we have to wake up and choose to re-Christianize ourselves and declare God for the day, because it's easy to wake up and just go through our day as if we have no God. And so I think it's a good examination of conscience, and especially with the woman butchering it. I don't remember her story. We'll fix this up in post. But her faith, she had so much faith that she went to Jesus, and she was not a Jew. She was a Gentile. And they have that banter because Jesus is like, it doesn't matter what house you come from. It's your faith, and that's his whole message. Like,
Your faith saved you, like he
Yeah.
says. Go ahead, Kevin.
I think like him being like a Gentile and not like a Jew kind of shows God's love is just. He doesn't have what I don't know the word for it. We use that word everywhere. God's love is diverse, I guess, right? Yeah. Yeah, right. It's like it's bad just about about the heart, like where does the heart go and all that. And I think that's a nice way to show like he was the first Gentile like to pop up in the story, right? For that wasn't a Jew. Um, it's cool because it's like I'm gonna bring it back to our last episode. We had Moses who brought the Jews over, the Israelites, to the Promised Land, right? And it's like, oh, you think that they're the only ones allowed in God's Promised Land, in God's heavens. But God's like, hey, you know what? Like, we got to spread it out. Like the Israelites were the first mark of the freedom, and then from the Israelites, they could then help and convert over more people. And I think, and to those that don't need the conversion, like Job, who already has the faith in God, just doesn't know. Like Job knows God is God. It just maybe doesn't have like that pinpoint to put it on. Like it's this God, but he knows God is God. He knows God is just. He gives all his love to God and has all the blessings and goes through the downs and then gets all the rewards, right? And he knows that God is there. And he's not a Jew, so it's not like it wasn't like it was a culture thing that told him this is God. It was more like Job discovering God on his own and going through his faith within God, and it kind of like shows like God is diverse. He doesn't just love like one nation. He doesn't just love one ethnicity or one person. He goes on to love the world and love the hearts of his creation.
I definitely think that he shows that faith is not based on a religion. It's based on the faith, like you guys were saying. And when you see that this is the first character in the Bible, in the Old Testament, that is not Jewish or Israelite, it it should broaden your mind to say, like, what is more important, your religious affiliation or your faith in God, or the actions you do for God, and how do you believe in him, and how much you love him, and how much you go out there every day to live your life according to God, than committing to what people view you as being religious. So to me, that's what strikes me about the story of Job. It's like it doesn't even mention like his affiliation. It just says he was from the land of Uz, and that's all you need to know, because to God it's like, he's a testament. He testifies that it's about the faith and the heart that's more important than anything else. And it shows us throughout the Bible that there was a lot of Israelites, and that although they had the temple, they have all these symbolisms, and they still didn't behave accordingly. Although Job never had a temple to go to, probably, or never had everyone else didn't believe what he believed, he remained faithful in God all the time. And this is something that I actually like what you said: lamentation versus complaints. And Job also teaches us what is the right way to approach to God when you're in pain. You can choose complaints. That means like you're literally bittering against God, versus lamenting that you're in pain, that you're suffering. It's a different approach. And I say this because most people confuse these things. When you're in a position of, especially if you're in a position of leadership, or you're in a position where you're in charge of people, and you go to your leader and you ask them, oh, you wanna put in a complaint, and a leader can't tell the difference if it's a complaint or a lamentation. And they always say, well, you're always complaining. Right? And God teaches us how to handle a lamentation. But also, Job is teaching us, don't complain. As hard as it is, lament. It's better that you lament to God that He is going to take care of it, that you complain like the men were doing, complaining to Job that he did wrong. Right? So there's a difference. And what is your opinion about that? I don't know, Kevin, you want to start with that one, like complaint versus lamentation?
Yeah, I love how you connected it back to the Moses story too. And it kind of shows us like every time someone complains about like God's stuff, it goes downhill, right? It's like don't complain about God and what He has set up.
Yes.
And it's like, and it's so cool to see, like, and I like how you connected it to the leaders as well. It's like, can leaders distinguish the complaints versus the lamentation? It's like saying, like, complaining is it's bittering something. Lamenting is kind of, it's not bittering, but it's,
You're in pain.
yeah, it's like you're in pain during that process. It's like, this isn't me saying, oh, this right here sucks. It's more like this right here is hurting. And that, like, that's the difference with Job. Like, Job wasn't saying this right here sucks to me and this all this sucks. Job was like, this hurts a lot. This hurts a lot. Can I bear this pain? And leaders, I think, when they hear something and or some leaders, like, because we can't put it to all leaders, right? Some leaders or managers, let's say that, right? So when managers, they hear something about your hurt and they don't want to address it, and they
Or
be responsible upon it, they would just push it onto the complaint side and say this person is just complaining about this so many times. And if you're going through the legwork of it, the pain of it, but they don't want to step into it, like if they don't want to step into it, they will understand it in a sense.
No, but also, oh my God, I'm laughing because it reminds me of how managers are thought to even evaluate this situation, and how they evaluate it is, I'm gonna write about it and put it as a behavior to hold you accountable for something that you're suffering about. Or they make the decision also like, hey, go to HR. So it's almost like they, like, again, goes back to like Job and his friends. Like, that's how the behavior that you come. I think that's what God is trying to showcase us. It's like people are gonna react in this way when you have a lamentation. They think it's a complaint, or they're gonna judge you even if you're righteous and you have the right, you have the truth on your side. They wouldn't know how to handle it. And I'll pass it to you. Lamentation versus complaining. What are your thoughts about that, Autumn?
It all for me goes back to posture, because it takes one person to start a chain reaction, right? And I think too, giving counsel is a big responsibility, because you can easily get caught up in becoming prideful with your counsel, which I feel like is what happened with the friends. True counsel comes from God. And if you're in that position where you are counseling somebody, then it's your duty to bring the hope of God to them, because we have nothing. And true richness and like substance comes from God. So that is how we can counsel others. And I think it's very easy to get caught up in like the slip slope of pride. Like, oh wait, I know what I'm saying. I'm actually very wise and I'm a wise master. I can minister. But we see here, like, the lengthier their speech goes, the more they're putting rebuke on him, and they're causing him as the blame. And again, part of what they're saying is correct, like, right, like, you reap what you sow, but they're not doing it. They're not counseling him in a way that's pushing him closer to God. It's almost like they're putting a wedge between him and God. And then I bring it back to posture as well, because when we are lamenting to God, that's where we're on our knees and our hands are open and we're saying, Lord, like, this is really hard. You know, like the agony of the garden. Jesus was sweating blood because he knew it was coming. His passion was coming. And yet he's in the garden and he asked God, like, if it's your will, let this chalice pass from me. But if it's not, like, you know, may your will be done. That was a lamentation. And it's like a humble, like a humble way to acknowledge, like, this cross is heavy and it's splintery and it's hard and it's heavy, but I still love you and I trust that you will get me through it. Versus complaining, it's more of like your fist is towards the air and you're like, why? And you're like
You
bitter.
come down here.
Yeah. You answer to me right now. Yeah. Grab him by the ear. You tell me. And it's two different postures, right? One is you're humble and you're ready to receive and acknowledge that you don't know all. The other is I know everything and I want an answer why I'm going through this. And
But
it's another.
Job did that. Sorry to cut you off, but Job feels like to God like, I need an answer. Like if during that time he was like, I didn't sin, but I didn't answer why is this going through. And then God comes in that big storm, right? So it's like he was kind of like saying like I need that answer, but not like fist up in the air.
Yeah.
Well, he's asking though for the conversation. Like he wasn't condemning him. Like there's parts of me where I have in the past been very angry, and it's almost like you condemn him. You condemn him for even giving you a cross. Versus like Job, like it's okay to be angry in the way Job was doing it because he was like, I want to converse with you, but also like acknowledging that you are God, you're my father, and like I need to like bout this out with you versus against you. Like when you shear your teeth at him versus, hey, this is a lot, man.
I need to understand a little bit better.
Yeah. So I think it's a lot about recognizing your posture too when you're lamenting, and it's almost like a song of like the inner cry of your heart, and he hears that and he consoles you in that. And even if you are angry, because he gives us free will to be angry, it's always good to remember too, like, don't turn yourself against God, but rather invite him into it because he's the source, like the sustenance to get you through. Yeah, I love this topic. It's
I love what you just said because in moments of anger, we tend to want to be even alone because we can't even, talk with ourselves sometimes. We have these huge debates in our mind and it's always like, why did this happen? And when, like you were saying, Kevin, when God comes and answers those questions, are you ready to listen to what he has to say? How prepared are you? Because now when God comes, what is your composure?
Yeah.
So I'll let you jump into that one.
Yeah, it's like when like Job asked for God to come. He was like, I need this answer. And then when God comes, he comes in this fierce storm. And the first thing he says to Job is, stand up on your 2 feet like a man. And that's one thing. It's like, Job, you wanted these answers? I'm going to give them to you. But they're not going to be like direct answers, right? Like God still leaves his mystery in a sense. He leaves his fullness in there. God says, he shows him the complexities of the world. Can you build can you untie these ties from the stars? Can you like something with these creatures that I've created? So he shows him that complexity of the world, and then he asks Job's like, are you even able to answer your own answer? If you can't even understand these things, trust in my wisdom. Trust in this. And I don't think God will ever be direct with his answer. He won't tell you like, I'm doing this because of this. Like I'm doing this because it's gonna free a whole bunch of other people in the future, right? Because that's kind of like what Job's story is doing. He frees us from the devil, from the temptations from the devil. He shows us that even when you're at the righteous, that peak, the devil could come in and take it all away. But at that sense, you had to be like Job when he takes it all away, still love God. And God wasn't going to say that to Job. He just says, trust in my wisdom. maybe now Job in the eternity sees it. So it's like trust in God during those times, like when it is hard.
Definitely. You know what you guys opened this whole paradox for me, because you listen to God in Job, you listen to the same teachings in Jesus, giving you metaphors, giving you questions so you can think. And that's the beauty of teaching, is to make you think the different perspective. And God teaches us how to teach others, not by just providing an answer, because that's an easy way. That's what the devil does. You want this? Here it is. It's easy. Boom, done. But God teaches you through, like, well, work for it. Here's the question. Now start investigating how that looks like. So you can come with your answers and pray that I can give you wisdom so you can understand. I see like a connection in how, and you can see the same teaching from the Father and the Son through questions. He keeps asking. He's giving the answer with questions. Why? He wants Job to think. He wants Job to understand, not to just here's the answer, and he gets the answer. Like, oh, good. No, he's like, think outside of it, because God shows how human believe they're the center of the universe as well. Because he does say that. It's like that's why the questions. You're not the center of the universe. There's so many other things in the universe that you can't understand, but everything is connected, and there's a reason for it, and there's a purpose that you can't see. But at the same time, what is it that you want to see? Is it the complexity of the universe, or do you want to see me? What is more important? To know that, or to know me? So that right, this is why when you guys were talking, it's like, whoa, it's like, you go into those waters, right? But this is where you see that the Son and the Father are the same, because of the teachings, the behavior is the same teaching. You hear Jesus talking to the disciples in metaphor and asking them questions, and then you see the same kind of behavior with God, doing the same thing with Job, which actually I would like to ask you guys, through Job's story. One of the things that also is a little bit amazing is the wife, and how important it is to have a partner. What are you guys thought about her behavior? Oh my God! Autumn is like, oh, that's
Does not approve.
yeah. I'm gonna hear this one.
Yeah, right.
Wait, first I just want to say I really love the point you just made about how the Father and the Son are the same because of the way that they both question. Thank you for sharing that. That just lit my heart on fire. And to answer your question right now, I'm just going to go back to the garden really quickly, because as soon as Adam and Eve sin, the first thing God asks is, where are you? Like he always is questioning, like he's always seeking us, which is so beautiful. Now the wife, I have some problems with her. I don't know.
Her sincerity.
Yeah.
Because she's in the thick of it with him, and then she loses it. She breaks down and tries to get him to also curse God. And it's very, it's also like, it reminds me of Eve, because Eve, she shows the apple to Adam, and we'll go into that. That's a whole other episode as well, because Adam was right there with her, and he should have been protecting her too. But it's kind of like this thread, like she, instead of questioning with Job, like let's pray together, right, with Miriam and Aaron, and where they could have led the people to prayer, she could have also like hunkered down with Job and said, let's pray. Let's pray together. And she's like, let's curse God. Again, it's so important to examine the inner state of our heart, because when you're in suffering, your true nature comes right out. And whatever you've been feeding your soul, like, it gets revealed during something like that. So I feel like in her heart, yes, they were blessed and they were going through a really like nice life, but then as soon as, you know, everything got taken away, she was like, let's curse God together. And you know, he didn't do that with her, but it makes me sad that she wanted to do that and like encourage him. So it, you know, it makes me think too, it's important what kind of partner you choose, because you want a partner who's going to pray with you, who's going to praise God with you, but also how are they going to shepherd you through those storms that come? Because when things are great, right, you guys are smiling, you have on your best clothes, everything's great. But when you go through suffering, like a raw side of you comes out, and you want to know that your partner is also going to lead you to God. Because like I said, the answer to our questions is him and his presence. Is your partner going to grab your hand and say, listen, I don't know the answer to this, but you need to pray and you need to find it in him, because I can't fulfill that in you, and vice versa. And I think that's where a lot of problems come in. A lot of people, they don't discern relationships properly. It's kind of more about like me, myself, and I feel great in this relationship. But the whole point of your union is to get each other to heaven. That's the whole point of marriage. Because the goal, like, you're helpmates to each other. So where you are lacking, your partner will come in and say, let's get through this together, and vice versa. And if you're not doing that for each other, if you're not leading each other towards heaven, where are you leading each other towards? You know, if the closer you go inwards in a relationship, that's not a good sign at all. Because the song of hell is me, myself, and I, and you don't want that. You want to be with someone who's going to remind you, like, there's a greater truth, there's a greater life to come, and we have to walk through this valley of tears right now. So she failed. She failed that miserably, but I won't judge her too harshly because we're talking about not judging.
What are your thoughts, guys?
I think it's yeah, right.
Whip. We're gonna make an episode called The Whip.
Yeah. For I think it was hard. I think it was hard for her because it's so Job is going through the trials and the tribulations. During those trials and tribulations, like the devil whispered in one ear and said, "Curse him," curse God, and it's hard for her because it's just like she just lost everything as well. She just lost her family too. And it's like you could sympathize with them in a sense. You could sympathize and be like, "Whoa, like this is crazy. This is a lot that just went down. So much chaos just happened in an instant," and it's. Like imagine you're holding those kids for 9 months in your stomach, and there's 7 kids, 7 times 9, like that's like you're close to like 70 months of something of just holding kids, right? And just have them all gone away. Because I think that's what like a woman's heart is like really around that family. Like Job could handle the stock, he could handle all that other stuff, but like the woman's heart is really in the family, and to have her family be cursed. And to have her husband be cursed by the devil, it's hard. That's why she was like saying, "Job, why aren't you cursing God? Why aren't you doing that?" And it wasn't like she was telling him like curse God for all this. She was like questioning him like, "Why aren't you?" when all this is going down. So we could kind of like if we step into that shoe of like Job's wife's shoe, it's like all this bad is happening to the husband. Why aren't you doing that? And in all rights, it's like Job's going through a trial. She isn't. And that's why Job isn't like questioning, or just why Job isn't cursing God. This is why God knew his best. That's why God kind of like put his best servant to the trial, to basically to the battle, to the war with that. And that's why he put his best servant, because he knew that his best servant was not going to curse him. He knew that his love will always be there. And for like the wife, I guess like should have stood with him by his side and should have been there through that. But she was suffering as well in Job's suffering. Like, it wasn't just Job suffering. She was suffering too within it. And then his friends were suffering watching him do it through it. So it's like what happened within the Israelites, like as they were complaining, like here we see the devil pop up in another situation where he whispers, and like the devil whispered in during the 40 years in the desert by just going into one person's ear, complaining about not having water, or complaining about not having the food or meat, right? And then the whole community did it. But the devil does that to his closest people around him, to his wife, complain, tell Job to curse God. Then to his friends, tell Job to curse God. And Job had to be in his fortitude with God to not curse him, because basically now the devil's doing all this to him, and the devil's then getting his community to turn against him his own way. Mm-hmm. So it's like the trial went like really beyond, and then Job really had to stick to his foundations and into it.
I love what you just said too, because I think her question though reveals the state of her heart. So if she's asking him like, why aren't you cursing him too? It's because she was cursing him, you know. And I think I love Mary. I'll always bring Mary up. I'm sorry, guys, but Mary, like, Jesus was born to die, you know, and when she presented him in the temple, Simeon and the prophetess Anna, like, they were saying, a sword is going to pierce your heart, and she was underneath that cross, watching her only son be crucified. He's dying, and she's praising God. So,
we come with nothing and we leave with nothing.
That's like what Job said. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a one of the things I want to add to what you guys are saying is the importance of having the armor of God, just like Paul states. Mm-hmm. What are you doing to build that armor? And you can see the difference between what it is to have the armor of God, which Job had, and like you said, like a warrior, he was ready for that. That's why the devil had to ask for permission, because he knew that he would never get through Job. Never. The only way was getting and asking for permission to do so, because Job understood what it was to fight temptation, while everyone else you see in the story struggles with it. Everyone, the wife, the friends, they did not have the full armor of God, and it didn't matter what their background was. But this is where I think we don't talk too much about is, what was the level of love Job had for God? Because that brings me to the next question is, can you guys envision, because it says he was a righteous man, he was a loving, but can we imagine what that love for God looked like on the day-to-day basis? And although this was demonstrated to everyone that saw him and knew him, they still doubted his behavior. They doubted that he sinned, he did something wrong. Although they saw that this man clearly walked with the full armor of God every single day of his life, and they will still question his faith, question his behavior. So it's a lesson to be learned that if you walk with the armor of God, not only you're protecting yourself from the devil, but no matter what the comments of the outsides are, that it should never pierce you, because you have somebody that solidifies your story, which is God himself. In our case, is Jesus Christ. So what are your takes about this, the armor of God, Job wearing the armor of God and feeling protected?
Well, I think the whole attack from the devil was to try to prove that he could get Job to be unfaithful to God. So the way that we show God our love every day is through our fidelity. And he was trying to prove, like, I can get him to be unfaithful to you. And, like, I will say throughout the whole thing, Job was faithful to God. Like, he was tested, he was upset, he lost everything, but he never lost his faith in God. And, you know, in the garden, the devil, his primary attack, too, was on, like, identity, right? So he implanted the seed, like, hey, you can't trust God. So that's why, like, even throughout the ages and today, we all struggle with, can we truly trust God? And time after time, he's telling us, like, I am trustworthy, right? So that's our continual conversation with him even till today. And with Job, it's beautiful to see reflected to us what fidelity looks like in the midst of suffering, and it is possible to remain faithful. And so I think part of his armor was his faith and his knowing that God is faithful. And the reason too why God is asking, like, do not serve other gods before me, is because he loves us. And I feel like I've read somewhere before, like God feels jealous after us because he wants our affection only for him. And I really love that, because like, if any of us have ever experienced that in our hearts, like, God feels that 10 times stronger than what we're feeling for us, like, he's jealous of whatever we take our attention to instead of putting it on him. And it's because he loves us, and he is the most faithful one. And yeah.
Right. Can you ask a question again?
So, like, the Job shows us that how when you wear the full armor of God, you're able to withstand, temptation. But at the same time, can we imagine the kind of love that Job had for the Lord, for God? What are your how can you envision that? Because she's saying that it's about loyalty. What is your perspective besides loyalty?
I think it's like service. I think God gave Job gave God a lot of service, and that's why God also gave Job all those blessings. Because like with the blessings, he probably served a lot with it. It's like with all the livestock, he probably served with a lot of food to the community, or with a lot of he probably he served. I think Job served a lot to the people that were around him, and I think as a man, like righteous men serve, they serve their people. Like you think about a king as well. Like kings serve their people, they serve their communities, and if we're righteous, you'll serve your community. Like your community is like a representation of that kingdom, right? And like you can also have bad kings that don't serve their people, right? And then they just give them cake to eat, and those are not good kings. But Job was a righteous one, right? He had his great blessings in it, and he probably served with his blessings to all those people, and gave God his fidelity and loyalty. It's like to give service, not out of slavery, because it's not like he was slaved for it. It's out of righteousness. To give that service and righteousness with his loyalty to God is like a great way. And I think his way of loving God, like if you love somebody and you love something, you service it. Like a plant. If you love a plant very much, you water it. And it's you won't let the plant die because you're servicing the plant, in a sense. Like everything, like God, we serve God and God serves us, and that's why God also called him a servant. Right? It's like you serve God, you serve the righteous world. He probably, Job probably did a lot of conversions for God, saying probably spoke the word over, maybe not the way the Israelites did it, or the way the Jews did it. Maybe he did it in a different way, and that's why he was he probably converted a lot of people to God, and that could have been a great service,
I like that perspective that he probably reached to many people without being of what God was supposed to be represented by just the Israelite, the Jews. Uh, Another major takeaway to me is taking the good and the bad. We often always want to enjoy the good, especially in relationships. And this talks about the relationship with God too. We always want the blessings, but we don't want the tests. And perhaps the test is what provides us more blessings, because if we go through them and we learn from them, that's the way God is giving us the discipline to love more. and be more connected to him. And you know, in relationships, even now, like let's say a loving relationship, it's more like you were saying, what is it that you're gonna provide, more than like what can I give. And I think Job shows us that, like, what can I give even when, you know, everyone believes I'm not getting anything from God, I'm just being punished unfairly. It's like, no, I still gotta give. You know, yes, I will lament, but that doesn't mean that I'm against my own convictions, right? What I'm saying is I'm suffering and I have every right to cry. But to whom? You know, I'm going to cry to the Lord. Why? Because the Lord will understand why I'm crying and what to do with my lamentations and how to transform that into a blessing. So that, you know, so for people out there, when you get in a relationship, check yourself. Check what is it that you can give yourself in order for you to be able to give more without having the expectation that what you're giving needs to be reciprocated. Because at the end of the day, if God is the one reciprocating your good acts, you're going to be more blessed than if a human being gives you back what you're giving. And but again, that's the, I guess the moral of the story is like, why have an expectation? You know, he didn't. For example, at the end of Job's story, it says that he got all these, you know, land, he got stocks, he got a new family. Do you guys believe that was a gift or a blessing?
Oh, I think maybe it was both. Like, I think maybe Job worked his way back up to it too. Like, I think Job probably said, like, why would I change what I'll do? And probably found a way to, like, do it again. And then God was like, here, I'm going to pass down the gift of more, of double to you before going through this test. It's kind of like it's like the tangible gold star. Like, great job, buddy.
Outstanding work.
Yeah, literally, double it up. So I think that's one of the things that God did. He was like, you know, like, in a way, it's probably in a way it's kind of like sorry for putting you through the test for Job, and it's like, here, thank you so much for going through it and still having faith in me, for having faith in me and in my wisdom. I will give you all this, because God, he controls the universe. He knows he has everything that he knows what he's doing. So yeah, I think Job worked his way up to it. So it's like reward, blessing, gift, all three in one for him.
What are your thoughts, Autumn?
Um, I think it was a blessing because, well, I don't know if this is right or not, but I feel like gifts are his blessings, and yeah, I think he blessed him for his faithfulness, and it's like that's what heaven is. That's what it made me think of. So like at the end of your suffering, you earn the crown of perseverance. I talked about that with my friend, and she drew a beautiful crown and put the crown of perseverance under it. And it's such a beautiful image because he's rewarding your faithfulness. And sometimes we can feel like, oh, like the suffering's never going to end down here, but there is a reward waiting for us in heaven. And when he sees us, he like rewards us and calls us by name. He crowns us as well. And I'm looking forward to that day so much. I love that image. I love to bring that to prayer. And I think that's what was rewarded, was his fidelity. And that's why it was his perseverance that got him through the whole book. Because he could have easily given up and, you know, gave himself over to evil and said, like, I'm done. But he didn't. He remained a faithful son.
To me, the reward was the test, and the blessing, the gift. The blessing was the gift, because like the reward itself is going through the test of your faith, testing how strong are you, like testing your muscles. Like, what is it that you can really take when you have me, right? So you've been rewarded with all this strength that I give you, so you can sustain even the hardest temptations. And then the blessing is, I'm sorry, the gift is like the it's like, okay, you already got rewarded with the test, but I'm gonna bless you for that because you were able to show who you really were. And I think that's what tests. We sometimes see these hardships not as a reward because we're suffering, but there's so much information that you learn from yourself when you go through hardship. You learn more about yourself through hardship than when you are in peace. In peace, there's really nothing more than to think about, the environment that is so quiet. But when there's a lot of noise, how do you quiet down the noise so you can sustain yourself and you can continue walking when everyone's pushing you back? So the reward is in the test to me, but the blessing, definitely the gift is the blessing, like saying, well, even if I didn't give you anything, you will still be happy. But because I love you, I'm going to give you a prize because, like you said, it's like he entered this contest and he won with outstanding colors. So, but again, I believe Job would have been happy only with the relationship. This is why I believe he got rewarded, even doubled, multiplied what he got, because not only because of his faithfulness, but because what mattered to Job wasn't losing. It was always about winning God's, favor. And I think that's really the real blessing of the story. What he really wins is that he got, like after the conversation, God, imagine, this is my next question. Autumn, what do you think he felt after talking and listening to God?
Oh my goodness. I'm sure he felt like he was captivated by, first of all, his awe, because he's talking to him about all these little things that I don't even think about, right? And then wonder, but then humility. Because just to have God answer you back, one, so you're hearing his voice. Two, everything that he's bringing to light for him to contemplate, it's almost like, yeah, I would say that he felt humbled through it. And it's good, too, to be grounded in suffering, because it's easy to, feel so overcome by uncomfortability that it, poofs you up, kind of, where you're in this place of, how dare anything happen to me? When is this over? But he talked to him in such a way where he was like, the earth is still spinning, and there's all these things that I take into account in a day, and yet I love you as well, and I am here for you as well. And I see the deer, giving birth and her birth pangs, and I have to provide for the lion cubs so that they eat, and I'm here for you, and I'm not giving up on you, and I'm not forgetting you. So I would feel humbled hearing that, and oh, of course you're watching over me too, because you make sure the sun rises every day, and you make sure that we still have oxygen to breathe, and you have the cosmos being upheld. Why wouldn't you get me through this trial? It's very humbling to think about that, because it's easy to turn on him, to be like, oh, you're letting this happen because you just want to see me suffer, but that's not true. Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Kev, about when Job finally, it says in the Bible, he asked 30 times to talk to God, and then finally he gets his answered, his wishes.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts when God appeared to him and he's like,
In awe. I think if I were saw God in a huge storm,
I know, right?
it would be like, whoa, who's talking to me? Where's the Ramaz curtain? Yeah, right. So I'll just look into the sky and I'll be like, whoa, and then God took him through a tour too of the world, and then during that tour of the world, it just would have been, I would have been so dimensional, right? It would have been I'm stepping into God's world. I'm going and I'm seeing what's going through in this side of the world and this side of the world, and even down into Adam. I'm like, what's going on in this wood, right? Like even in there. And then after the conversation with God, it's kind of like the head probably is filled with my head will be filled with so much euphoria. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. And then to be like back down into this dimension, the 3D, the world that we live in, right? And to here just would have been like, I would have been humbled, like way more humbled than I was. Like, I would have been like completely fine, like having blisters and completely fine, just going through the pains and being like, I don't fully understand this world. This world is really complex. I just have to be grateful for living in it, and I'll just show God my gratitude, my everything, and I'll give Him even more of what I've done before, and right, I would have given Him righteousness, or like really like probably like push myself to death, like for the world, because then it's like death doesn't even matter. Like death is not even a concept in God's world, right? But not in that world, in that spiritual world. I'm like in this plane, it's like, yeah, because then it's food, right? It's like it's food for the lion to eat, and like it's still life for like the mama deer to bear. So I would just be like in full awe. I wouldn't really like outwork myself to death for God in the sense to be His ultimate servant.
Excellent. Death is definitely a transition that is very scary for us, even because obviously we fear death. But it's interesting because the devil can do anything, but God says except his life. Have you guys thought about that? What are you, I don't know who wants to take that one first.
Rock, paper, scissors again?
Autumn always wins, man. I don't even know why you go there.
Yeah, literally.
You want to go?
Sure. To think about death, like contemplating death, or
like why did God said, well, do everything except
hurt him,
like kill him,
except for killing him.
You can hurt him, you can do everything you want, except killing him.
I think it's for, in one way, it's like God protecting Job on his front of like, he knows that the devil's gonna come down heavy on him. Like the devil doesn't play by rules. He's gonna like I think God knows like how the devil plays, and he knows that if he's gonna try to tear apart Job, like he's basically saying, you know what, you can tear apart Job, just don't kill him, still leave him with his life. So like he could message it, right? So he can message it, and then Job even goes back over to, and then the devil goes back over to God, and then asks him like, hey, I just teared him all down, and he's still faithful to you. What happens if I take away his health? What happens if I give him sickness? Do the people in sickness really still praise God? And then that's when God kind of gives like a little edge into like saying like, it's not like we're not gonna kill Job now, but maybe it is like, let's hurt him in a different way. And then God allows it, right? He allows it because he knows Job's heart. He knows that Job will still be faithful to that, to him, to God. And the devil does cast on like sickness onto Job, and Job still in that sickness still praises God. I think if God allowed the devil to kill him, that like the story that we have now wouldn't have been like told and lived. Instead, we'll just hear about the story of when God allowed the devil to attack his servant, and the servant got into eternity, but he doesn't live no more here. I think we needed Job to go through the trial, still live, and still live in his suffering, because it's like the ultimate suffering is like not the ultimate suffering. I don't want to say the ultimate suffering, right? But real bad suffering is living in the suffering.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you could take, if you take away his life, then you take away the bad. But Job accepts the bad with the good. He says, God, I have to accept God is all bad. I'm going to accept God all in his good, and I also have to accept God in his bad.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, if God wasn't protecting Job to live from the devil's snares, the devil probably would have took him out in 3 days. Like, he probably would have, not even 3 days, probably would have done it during that same day where he took all the camels, took all the lives, took his whole family, took everything. Like, I think that's where God kind of like set the borders for that type of play to happen within it. And that was a harsh playground like, right between them.
Definitely. What are your thoughts, Autumn?
I think it shows that God is the author of life, and only He can give life and take life, and that's not in the devil's jurisdiction at all. And I also like that He sets us aside, where He's like, yeah, you can tempt him and do all this, but don't take his life. And for me, it's like the hand coming out, like, don't touch my children.
Mm-hmm.
And He has claim on our lives because He gave us life, and He continues to give us life. Like, every time a baby is born, He's breathing life into that child. And there are days, right, where a baby is born and a family member dies. And it's that beauty, it's that complex beauty that a life is given and a life is taken. But He's the author of that, and He knows the time that we were all born, and then He knows the day that we are called back to Him, which is so beautiful. And the devil has no say in any of that because he's not a creator and he's not a life giver. So that's what that shows me, and I love that because it's like, even though God allowed him to be tempted, his life is still sacred and upheld in His sight. And so, and in the end, when He blesses him with the twofold, it's like, oh, I think that's how much He loves us,
I definitely think that he literally, to me, God said, well, you test him, I will discipline him. Like, you can test him, but I'm the ultimate judge at the end. I will decide, like you said, if, protecting his life, because not only you don't have dominion, but also I already written the story for him. For that, you can't even kill him. So, because his story is supposed to be, like you said, from beginning to end, it's already written. There's nothing you can do to kill him because it's already been ordered even before I even tell you, don't kill him, And that's how much control God has with everyone's life, especially in times of tribulation. I wanted to take this to this spectrum because Job is all about the tribulations and how the devil attacks us. But going back to Adam and Eve, the responsibility that we have for choosing that, we chose, we decided, to eat the apple. We decided to elect a king over God. We have selected for that. What I see is that for that we have to, because we chose that, we need to also be responsible for the consequences of our choices. And looking at Job, he understands that, the concept, Adam and Eve sin, these are the consequences. Good and bad, I still got to hold on to the Lord because it's not my place to judge him. My question to you guys, like, what do we normally do? What is the normal behavior of us when we go through these tribulations? What do we really hold on to? And do we accept the responsibility of being with God?
There's a great story that it greatly moves me. I'll just say like some of it now, but in Rwanda, there was the Rwandan genocide.
Yes.
And there's this beautiful woman. Her name is Immaculate, and so her family, they were Catholic, and they were a part of the opposing tribe that was being persecuted. not even just for their faith, just for being a part of that tribe. And on the day that like the massacre started, her dad saw her and gave her the rosary, and he said, "Go hide in our neighbor's bathroom." And she said she didn't want to go, but she was being obedient to him, and she said like she just knew like that was going to be the last time that she saw her family. So she ran to her neighbor, and he took her and 7 other women and hid her in a 3x4 bathroom with no windows, and she hid in there for 3 months. And while she was hiding in there, he said, like, don't talk, don't flush the bowl, like, I'm not even gonna tell my kids that you're in here. And she was in there for 3 months while her entire family was slaughtered, and a lot of the town was slaughtered too. And she explains how the only thing she had in that bathroom was God. And she held on to her rosary, and she said, like, she would feel like anger, but then she started praying for them, and she had to forgive them in the bathroom, which I can't even imagine, because you're in there with 7 other women. It's so tiny. And she says too how the like tribe came in with their machetes, and they were like raiding the place, and she was praying to God, and she was like, please Lord, like, just don't let them open the door today, like, just don't let them open the door today. She's like, you are God of the universe, like, you can do anything, you can not let him come in here. And she said that the guy went to open the door, and he turned to the man and he said, you're not hiding anybody in here, I trust you. And he walked away. And she said she was like, when we say, God, you can do the impossible, you can do the impossible. And she said that in that bathroom she went through a whole conversion of heart, because she said how many people harbor hatred in their hearts, and we truly don't love our neighbor. And so she was forgiving them, and she said like she felt God was preparing her, like, when you walk out of here, your family won't be here, like, you still have love. And that's all she had in that bathroom was God. And then when she came out, her whole family was killed, and they were murdered, and she came face to face with the killers, and she forgave them. And I think like 2 of the other girls in the bathroom with her, I think they were angry with her that she was talking about this, but she came face to face with him, and she said to him, like, I forgive you. And I forgot what happened exactly in their town, but the guys ended up coming out of prison, and he said to her, like, I don't know what to do with myself, because at least while I was in prison, I knew I was serving time for what I've done. And she said to him, like, you have to pray to God, because he will forgive you. And he asked her to like put his kids through school, and she said, okay, like, I'll do that. And listening to her talk, it's so beautiful, because like in your question right now, what do you have when you're going through something like that, when your family's being killed? And she said the people who were hunting them down were family friends, and they knew she was missing, and they said, like, you're the one who was missing, and we were trying to find you so we could kill you. And she, like, up until now, she talks about how we need to have radical change in our heart and love for God and our neighbor. She said, because we are the image of God, and they're the images of God, and like, we're all one. And she said, like, that's the last time she ever saw her dad, and he gave her the rosary, and he said, hold on to God. Like, it's so beautiful. And those are like the last memories she has of him teaching her about the faith. So her story greatly moves me. I'll send it to you guys after. And she has a beautiful book. It's called Left to Tell. And it's radically, radically beautiful, because it challenges you in our hearts, like, to move out of the posture of anger and unforgiveness and into freedom and forgiveness, and what that actually looks like to go through something like that. And she looks beautiful, like, she looks so free, and you would never know like what she went through.
Nice. When those things happen, when in the dark, what do I do? When I'm in the dark and I think like all the chaos is just happening, and I know when one chaos happens, chaos seems to follow chaos. Like if I drop one thing, another thing will drop like literally like 5 seconds after, or something like that. Like chaos will just follow chaos. Same way like good follows good. It's kind of like that cycle that goes around. When I know that when I'm in a chaotic spot, like, I know at the end there's gonna be a good. Like, I hold on to the flame. Like, I guess the way to visualize it, if we're in a dark room and you see that flame across, I'm like steadfast on that flame. Like I have horse blinders on that flame. And if the flame even goes out, I'm steadfast on that ember. I'm like fully towards on that ember, because that ember could turn back into a flame, right? So I hold myself onto the good, and even when I know like I'm in a very good spot, like I know like chaos could come at any moment, and chaos will come at any moment because it's chaos, right? Chaos out of order. Well, chaos just comes. I know I can handle it because the good will be there. The good comes out of it. Like you could pull good out of chaos. You could pull so much good out of chaos. It just depends on like how is it looked at? How is it viewed? How can we see it? Do we take those perspectives of the friend and the wife of Job, or do we take the perspective of like, I guess there's like three perspectives in there, right? You got the friend and the wife, then you got Elijah or something like that. That perspective saying trust in the wise Lord, and then you can also try to take in the Lord's perspective. This is all complex. Like I'm not gonna fully understand it, right? But I'll get myself through and have faith into it. So like I try to keep myself on the third and the second. Know that God is wise and just. And the third is I know I'm gonna get through this. It's complexity right now. I just don't know why it's happening, but I don't need to know why. I just need to know I gotta just go forward, just get it through it, because it's not gonna be the whole life. And even if it is, the death is eternity, right? So death doesn't matter. I'll get through it either way.
Also, the fact that where do you get your information from? Because the story of Job is also talking about where do you go for wisdom? You hear your friends? Do you listen to your wife? Do you listen to a wise man? Or do you want to outsource to God? So which one is going to give you truth and your guidance through bad moments? I believe that human beings have qualities to help you.
There's a lot. Sometimes I think there are certain circumstances where you learn the lesson in the midst of the suffering. Most of the times it's just about getting up every day and getting through each moment that you really don't reflect on what you've learned until you're out of the storm. And it's a good parallel to being in the desert. There's dryness. It's like spiritual dryness. It's hot, it's heavy, the walk is arduous, it's very long. And you have your basics, it's you just need water and food. And for me, it's like you have your faith and you have love, and that's what gets you through. And it's hard, and when you're carrying a cross, because you're kind of thinking about, well, I just want this to be over. It's like every second. When's the cross going to be over? When is it going to be finished? When's it going to be over? When is it going to be finished? This sucks. This is hard. You have a weight on your chest all the time. And it is true. Like, I've been in a situation where it was just one thing after the other. Every day I was waking up, everything was getting worse. My whole world crumbled literally to the ground. And I was like in the ash. I'm like what? And again, I come back to counsel. Where you get your counsel from is where you need the people who are going to redirect you to God, because that's the only way that I was able to carry my cross. It's like, do not take your eyes off of him, because he is there with you and he is getting you through. And it was almost harder to pray with faith, hope, and trust while you're going through something. But at the same time, that's all you have. And it's good to have that unravel while you're praying. Because who better to wrestle with than God, And I can sit here and say, like, God, I don't think I'm going to get through this. I know you know what's going to happen, but it doesn't feel like I'm going to make it out. But I know that you'll get me out of it. And the question before too, where do you get your wisdom from? It's so important to have people around you who can direct you to God. Because if they direct you towards things of the world, you can easily go downhill. Hey, you want to just like take some drugs to get through this? Go ahead. Or like you want to go do some like immorality stuff? Go ahead. Like you just want to like cover it up? Go ahead. You need the person who's going to come in and be like, yes, this hurts, this sucks, but we will get through this, and you have to turn to him. If you don't have those people in your corner, you should find some, you should pray for some, but try to remember that yourself, because it's so important. When you are carrying a cross, everything is fuzzy. At least that's how it was for me. Everything was fuzzy, and the only constant, the only clarity is from his love. And I'm speaking from experience, and that's what gets you through. It gets you through to where you can make it to the harvest, and then you can sit and be like, wow. Then you can reflect, like, oh, this is what I learned. I learned this and this and this. But in the moment of combat, it's just the basics. Like, God, I love you, and you love me, and we'll get through it.
I like what you said, because people will always point you out to where you don't have to suffer. And most people see that as the biggest safety network, not knowing that if you take the easiest route, the shortcut is also going to limit the experience. And a lot of people don't want to suffer. A lot of people want everything to be, given, and they want to live in a privileged way. But God is teaching us, earn it. Earn it through your hard work. Earn it through, being a good person, even if the other person is not good to you. We have this whole, I look at Job as, if I bring Job to today's life, can you imagine Job being on Instagram, right? He's the wealthiest man, according to the scriptures. Job is perhaps the wealthiest person ever, right? Blessed. It's almost like he's humble about his privileged life that he has earned due to his faith. And today we see a society that tries to put an image so people can perceive them as the Job, but they haven't walked a day in Job's shoes, and we want to always create the best image, but we never want to face our calamities or expose them even, right? You know, it's very rare that you see somebody that's going through a Job tribulation being posted online. Why you think that is, Kevin?
I think in the online sphere, it's about like showcasing the best. And I think maybe in the beginning, like I think sometimes people, like if Job were to post his sufferings, that would kind of be like, I guess in the online sphere, it'll kind of be like, why post the suffering of this? Like if you were to say like, oh, I just lost all my stock, lost all this, lost all my wife's kids, like the reward will probably, like the people will probably feel bad, and then they'll just give everything right to him, and then the trial tribulation probably won't be as much if you were to make it out in public, because like the online sphere is kind of like the public sphere. It's outside of the private sphere, the private thing that goes on. I'm thinking like when Job was going through his trials, tribulations, it was more private than public, in a sense. Like I think everybody knew Job was going through it, but I don't really see the community step in to help Job out through it. Besides his own circle of friends that were in there. Online in today's digital age, I think it's like people. I think people do post up like their trials and tribulations. When you think of like not Groupon, but what's the other one? I forgot the other one where it's like you could donate to it. It's green too.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, like people.
GoFundMe.
Yeah, GoFundMe. People will post up the trials tribulations on GoFundMe in a sense, and then it'll be the people that help out within the trials and tribulations. So it's like the community helps out inside of it. If it was a GoFundMe back then, I don't think Job would have taken the GoFundMe. Like I don't think.
But it's interesting what you're saying because you're opening another umbrella. In the Bible, it doesn't show any part of the community coming to him in those times of tribulation. There's only a very few, and it's a truth about when you're going through harsh times. There's very little people, but God is always there. I wanted to ask you this, Autumn. What would God, if Job existed in this time, going through all these things, what would God want Job to post if he wanted him to post something?
Whoa. That's a great question. What would he post?
Because from the human factor, like Kevin is saying, it's like, yeah, he'll probably put his calamities, what's going on, but the big point of reference, like Job's story, God showcases this. You know, now how would that look in a digital perspective?
What's coming to my mind right now is just so funny. I feel like he would take a picture of the sky and he would put, right, the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. I think that's something he would post.
That's actually that's I would say a iconic message
Yeah.
in the Bible.
Yeah. And, you know, when you think about it, his sores were bleeding. I'm sure they were smelly. You know, you think of the lepers. The lepers were isolated from society. They were sent to like that island on Hawaii, and they like if you got leprosy, that's where you were going. And if you had to go minister there, it was like kind of like a death sentence. Like, okay, I can't come back. And it's uncomfortable, I think, when someone's suffering outwardly, because it makes you confront a side of yourself that easily wants to turn away from suffering. We all cringe at suffering, right? And when someone has it on their outward appearance, it's kind of like immediately you have a reaction to it. Oh, I don't really want to see that, or I want to like tell them they're loved and like give myself to them. It's hard to confront suffering for a lot of individuals. And like you think of New York City, there's a lot of homeless people on the streets. People just walk over them every day. They got just used to them being there. In LA as well, you have the rich of Hollywood on this side, and then you have the other side where everybody in the street, it's all the homeless people. And in LA, it's more evident, like the side of rich and then the side of the poor. And so when you're confronted with that, it's like, well, if everybody were to remember, like, we all bear a cross, and we all want to be treated with dignity while we have a cross. It's easy when somebody's, I hate the saying, beggars can't be choosers.
Yes.
I hate that because I'm like, that's not fair to rob somebody of a dignified life because you're being called to help them in that moment. And I've met a lot of people who say that, like, beggars can't be choosers, like, you get what you get. But it's like, no. I was with the Sisters of Life volunteering, and the sisters were sharing, like, how many donations they get clothing-wise for, like, all the little children. And they were saying how, look at how important, she goes, yes, of course, these are all hand-me-downs, but they're, like, brand new. And she was like, you know how beautiful it feels to put on a brand new piece of clothing and for those little children to know that they are loved and they have dignity? And I'm like, that's so true. Like, when we're donating clothes, what are we giving people? You're giving people, like, your tattered clothing, and you're like, oh, well, they can wear it. And it's like, no, like, why does it take so much for us to go outside of ourselves and say, I'm going to buy maybe some brand new clothes, donate that to people? And Mother Teresa, too, like, she had these homes where she assisted people who were dying because she said, like, these people are children of God and they deserve to die in a dignified way. And one of the men that she was ministering to had, like, maggots on his skin, and she would just sit and clean him. And like, that is it. Those images stick with me because I often ask myself, like, can I show up for those who are suffering as well and be the light of God for them or the smile of God for them? Because you never have nothing. Mm-hmm. We always have a smile, or we have a bit of love to give to others. And yeah, I'm sorry, that grinds my gears when people say that because I'm like, and you know what? Yes, Job, he was going through a lot, but I still say, like, his friends sat with him and that goes a long way too, just to be with somebody.
Mm-hmm. You open a perspective for me, because I believe also what God is intending to do is to teach the wealthy how to behave. You just hit it with the separation of those that are wealthy and those that are not. Job is the example of how to behave, because Job is not rich. Job is wealthy in many ways, not only materialistically, spiritually. He's wealthy. And it teaches society of those that accrue wealth how they should behave. So it's almost like, hey, you want to know how to act with your wealth? Read the book of Job. Because the same way you have a responsibility not only to accrue more, but you have a responsibility to know what to do with God's blessing. And because he gave you a talent. And what is it that you do with it? Because the same way that he has given to you, it might not be this generation, but maybe 5 generations down, it's gone. And not only you, but your family did nothing well with that wealth. So I think it's a blueprint for those that are wealthy on how to behave. And I want to bring the comparison of Job's suffering with Jesus' suffering. I want to hear your takeaway, because we all think Job suffered a lot on the hands of the devil. Jesus suffered, I believe, in my perspective, way more in the hands of people, triggered by the devil itself. So he had people and the devil pinning him down. So what are your thoughts? Who wants to go first?
I think for Job and Jesus to suffer, and they both suffered a lot. Job was only during that time period, where Jesus was kind of during when he was when he came back from his mystery years, when he was like 30s, up until when he got right back into Rome, back into preaching, and then to the Passion. Like, he suffered during that whole time, and not only because like he was trying to preach to people and give them goodness, and the people kept doubting on Jesus, and then he would go out again, and then he'll convert some, and then a lot of people, and then The other majority would be doubters. He'll go back out, bless some, and then he would get cursed by the people again. And then again, it happened over and over again for him during up until his passion. Like even when they let the criminal loose versus him getting crucified, right? Like how you let an actual like psychopathic criminal on the loose that would just go out and murder versus somebody who hasn't harmed a soul besides flipping a table. Like besides that, like how does that happen? And it kind of just shows like the people, like the snares of the devil around the people more. Like Jesus was there to free them. He was freeing them from the snares. The people were the ones who kind of allowed their own snares, like to go through, like just to let like a whisper, a ripple of a whisper. Like even in the Passion movie, like you see the devil come through with its own baby around, but like in the crowds, like just appearing like there in the crowd, saying like I got the people around, like but Jesus's world is his that the heavens isn't in this world. It's more than this world. Like the devil could have this world, but he cannot have the next. He cannot have that next world. And I think Jesus suffered throughout the whole time of every time someone doubted, every time someone didn't go through, like didn't follow Jesus. I think that's when his suffering was happening. And then it tenfolded or 100-folded as he was going through his walks, because he had people like screaming and like applauding, like, and then it's up until his death where they repent, where some repent, like even the soldiers repenting up until like his death. Like it was not even like when he's still alive and saying we're sorry for doing it. It's like it's literally when he dies here, that's when they realize their mistake. And it's sad. It's sad to see sometimes. It's like, how can we recognize that in ourselves as well? Like, where does the devil whisper in our ears and say, like, they're following Jesus, but then you're gonna pull, like, and then it's up until the death happens, then it's like, oh shit, like he was actually like really great, like what? So it just has me thinking.
That was beautiful. Yeah, Jesus' suffering, I think in both, right, they show us how to suffer well. But with Jesus' particular sufferings, he had many, right? He had his suffering in the agony of the garden, which was like his anticipation for what was going to come. And also, like, think about how much you're anticipating the suffering. You're suffering, you're sweating blood, you know, like that's I think about that a lot. And he was also suffering because he saw like the ages to come for the people who will deny him, who will end up damned. And it was hurting him because he's like, I'm going to do this right now, and there are still going to be souls who will refuse me, reject me, and condemn themselves to hell. And it was just causing him a lot of suffering and for what was to come. So I think about his agony there. I think about the scourging at the pillar, like when they scourged him, those tools were really harsh, you know, and he sat there and he took it for us, you know, and his mom and John and Mary Magdalene, they were there with him, like just so like with Job, with the friends who sat with him, that they were there with him, you know. And then carrying the cross on like your tattered flesh, like that was painful. But he did it with love in his heart, and he didn't say a word during his whole passion. He didn't complain. He didn't lament either. He bore the whole passion silently. And the only time he speaks is on the cross, when he says, when he speaks to the thief, he presents Mary to John, and giving his mother to us. And when he says it is finished, and
Forgive them, Father.
forgive them, yes, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And then, why have you forsaken me? Those were like his 7 last words. And then he says, it is finished. But not out of his mouth was not any hatred towards God. Nothing bad came out of him. And I think often of his suffering, he didn't say a word. He bore it all with love, with so much love. Job shows us how to lament, but Jesus shows us how to carry it with love.
Very well put together. I also see the reference of, Job suffered without knowing, and Jesus suffered knowing. What is worse or best, knowing or not?
Oh, wow.
Handling the anxiety of knowing that you're going to be crucified versus not knowing when will it end, or if it ends, what kind of life will you have? Jesus knew that was the beginning, the end to begin something new. And I believe what Job is teaching us is to, as a human being, we will always be limited to protecting ourselves, right? A lamentation is about ourself and our suffering. But when you have Jesus teaches us that the sacrifice has to be for everyone, not only for yourself. Because Jesus never complained was because he knew that he was saving everyone. Who was Job saving? Right? So who was Job saving besides himself and his dignity? And the fact of what he did well was defend his relationship with God. I believe that stands out beautifully about Job. It's like, I'm going to protect my thesis about God no matter what. Jesus, on the other hand, had a bigger thesis to defend. I got to save everyone, born and unborn. How do I do that? Through action. I can't even say anything. So while you were talking, when both of you were talking, I thank God for putting the imagination in me. And I was like, wow, like how God teaches us to be, you're going to have your Job moments. And how should go about them, but also you should evolve into the Jesus moment, right? And when you're through tribulation, so you have to evolve from being Job to being Jesus. It's okay. You start lamenting. It's okay because you don't know how to handle the pain. But once you get into it and you evolve into becoming Christ-like, there's a different type of behavior. And I when you both were talking, I was like getting these images of like I was like, wow, like when you guys talk, you guys like, it's almost like God is whispering like these things to me. So I'm paying so much attention to you guys that you guys would definitely brighten up my mind when you talk. So, and my heart. Yeah. And so my last conclusion for the book of Job that we have tried our best to analyze and give sense is what is your major takeaways about Job, and what is that you guys learned through this beautiful chapter?
I think with Job, I kind of want to just continue a little bit with the Job and the Jesus a little bit.
All right, go ahead.
Go
shoot for
a little bit. Yeah. I think with Job and Jesus, it's pretty interesting because it's true. Job was doing it for him and what was around, and then Jesus was doing it for all of humanity, his sufferings through that, and Jesus knowing his sufferings was coming, versus Job that had no idea this was coming. Job was the surprise, and because of that, the surprise that happened into it, it was just like a different way to path through it. Like it wasn't like a mission. Like I think with Jesus's way, he knew that, like Jesus saw it coming, which added the anxiety to it. But then it I don't know. I can't stand in Christ, right? But all I can do is just give my own perspective on where it's coming from, right? So I think in my perspective, it's like if the suffering is for a mission, and if there's a mission within it, it's like you have, like Jesus knows on this date this is gonna happen, and we're here. Disciples come through. We had to spread this word so far, and that's how we got the Bible, right? He wrote down written word, telling other people to go through with the word. So having that mission, like I think Jesus was like, I can't complain about this. I can't go through with this. I mean, I can't complain. I can't like go against like God, right? Because yeah, he had to go through with this. So Jesus, but he went through it, and then he did the mission. And he said all is done, all is right. But then he does question the Father a little, like why. But then it's like the Father knows. It's like he knows where like Jesus' mission gave us the Bible, all these that came around. And then I guess for the closeout portion, it's like I learned that with Job, all could be given and all could be taken, and it could happen at any moment. And when all is taken, you still have God, and you could go to God, go before Him, praise God, even if He's the one who took it all. Like even if He said okay for it. Like, go to God. There's reasons. There's a reason for your sufferings. So, put your sufferings to good reason.
I like that.
What I've learned today, your faith and your prayer can never be taken away from you. And also, in the midst of suffering, I feel like we shouldn't worry ourselves with trying to track down, where is this suffering coming from? Is this coming from the evil one? Is this coming from God? Why are you testing me, God? I think to put to rest skills, trying to track down exactly where it's coming from and just be in the journey of it and understand that it's going to form you in ways you can't understand yet, but to make you for the better, and that God is faithful and He's with you. And thinking of the moment that Jesus was forsaken on the cross, that was a particular suffering that God allowed Him to experience, where He cries out, it's almost like a bellow, like, my God, why have you forsaken me? And like He allowed Himself to feel that for those who feel forgotten, for those who are going through depression, for those who are in isolation. That is a very particular suffering where you feel like you're alone and forgotten about, and our Lord allowed Himself to partake in that, and then after that, that's when He says that it's finished. And to know we are not alone in our sufferings, even when we're forgotten about, or it seems we're forgotten about, or we're mistreated by society, you have a loving God who's right there with you every step of the way. And also when He answers Job, He answers him with these beautiful questions about the universe and how He's upholding everything, and He's also upholding you, and He will get you through these trials that seem like they're never going to end, and that there is no timestamp on it. There is a timestamp on it, and I guess the more you make your love firm in Him, the more you'll be able to withstand whatever comes your way. Because unfortunately, we're not promised a world that is free from suffering. When God made the world, He said it is good. He never said it is safe. So what we go through, it's to make us more capable of love, and to grow our hearts. That's right.
We'll cut.
I was just saying, the more that you plant your love in the firmness of Him and let that take over, you can get through the trials that He sends to you. So that is what I learned. How about you, Wendell?
I learned many things as you guys were talking, and I was listening carefully. It kept opening my perspective about, what does faith do to you in times of tribulations? And Job is a great example of, no matter what the tribulation is to hold on to God. Hold on to the only thing that can get you through real problems. And the prize is not the gift of reward, is what do you learn from it. And then God would gift you things, not because you deserve it, because He's good. Because He is conscious about what your needs are. And also the way He disciplines you through these sufferings. He does it with the will that you become a better person for yourself, for others, but also loyal to God. Being hurt by the devil is something we go through every day. Sometimes people don't have enough money to buy something, food. That's a suffering. Where do you go? Do you pray? Also it's a great lesson for those that have abundance. Job it's not somebody poor. It's somebody wealthy. And it teaches perhaps wealthy people of how to be loyal to God even with all the resources, what to do with it. And Jesus is also wealthy. He can create bread from nothing. But what do both of these people choose is to do what's right and be righteous to God. How many of the people that have wealth understand the philosophy of being a Job in their life and the responsibility that comes with it, right? And what are the sacrifices you must do? And think about, Job kept becoming more wealthy. Well, it wasn't because of his talent. It was because where he was depositing his faith. So my major takeaway was when we started to also compare the different kind of sacrifices, when you sacrifice for yourself versus when you sacrifice for everyone. And we have to develop into that, especially people that are in leadership position. I hear this a lot about, well, I got to give my kids a future and they need a home and it's like you become needy people versus being somebody protective of everyone in your environment. Is it okay that you're the only one winning versus, and this is where I compare Job to Jesus. Job, nothing that Job did wrong, but the story is he did it, because his reputation was also tainted, but he did it for himself. Jesus, on the other hand, teaches you, like, you need to develop from Job to Jesus. Why? Because your responsibility as a leader is for everyone. You can start as a Job. If you're in those leadership positions, it's okay that you started in Job and you are a Job. But you have to develop it to a Jesus position where you actually want everyone to win. And you sacrifice everything for those under you. And also, if everyone wins, think about how God is going to view you. And I think that's more important, how people view you. People, Job shows us too, people are going to have perspectives about you, perceptions. Even if you're right, they will believe you're wrong and they will accuse you of wrongdoing. But as long as you know that you're doing right and you are doing right by God, that's more important than the opinion and judgment of people. So those are my major takeaways. It's like the faith you should have in God, your evolution from being somebody that is looking to grow themselves to growing everyone, and where do you deposit your counseling, right? Like you said, that counsel should always lead to God. So those are my major takeaway. And this concludes our episode with Job. It's been beautiful. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about next week's chapter, which is a selection by Autumn. And it has to do with Peter in the water when Jesus is walking on water, and Peter attempts to do the same. So we want to give you a little hint of what that's going to look like next week. We've been talking about it like last week as well. But since you picked this topic, what do you want to leave the viewers with on this topic?
Ooh. There's many mysteries to unravel in that particular passage. But most especially what it means to have trust in the midst of the many storms in our lives, and what it means to keep our eyes on Jesus when the waves are storming and it's hard and the clouds are coming in, the lightning is striking, you have apostles screaming behind you because they're also scared. And you take that leap of trust to walk out into the water, and you dare to approach the ocean of mercy and the ocean of divine love, and you find yourself on those waters, and how to strengthen your trust, and when everything seems like you're on shaky ground, to continue to walk to meet Jesus, and to have that faith that he will get you through and that nothing bad will happen because he loves you. So just a little sneak peek.
Yes. This is gonna be an awesome episode, guys. So stay tuned for next week, and thank you. Continue to be blessed, and we hope that God is able to work in us so we can reach out to you, and that you guys pray for us as well, because we all need it. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.